In the labyrinthine underbelly of New York's Chinatown, where neon signs cast their garish glow upon rain-slicked streets and whispers in Fujianese dialects carry the weight of desperate dreams, one woman constructed an empire built not on narcotics or protection rackets, but on a more fundamental human commodity, hope. Cheng Chui Ping, known throughout the criminal underworld simply as Sister Ping, orchestrated what would become perhaps the most sophisticated human smuggling network in modern history, transforming the desperate flight of her countrymen into a brutally efficient enterprise that generated wealth beyond measure, while leaving a wake of human suffering that continues to reverberate decades later. Born in January of 1949 in the impoverished farming village of Shengmei, Fuzhou, Sister Ping entered the world at the precise moment when Mao Zedong's revolutionary forces were cementing their control over China. This historical coincidence would prove prophetic. Her life would become inextricably bound to the profound socio-economic upheavals that would drive thousands of her compatriots to seek prosperity across treacherous oceans, with Sister Ping positioned as their controversial ferryman. The crucible of her early life forged the temperament that would later characterize her criminal enterprise. A near drowning at 12 left her with the conviction that survival belonged to those who labored rather than those who remained passive. The two people who were lazy and sat back while others worked ended up dead, she would later recall of the incident. This taught me to work hard. Her father's 13-year sojourn in America as an undocumented immigrant, working as a dishwasher and remitting funds to his family, provided Sister Ping with a tangible blueprint of the American dream, one that would later inform her business model. After establishing herself as a businesswoman in Hong Kong, where she displayed an acumen for commerce that hinted at her future success, Sister Ping navigated her own passage to the United States in 1981 through Canada. Her modest beginnings in New York, opening the Takshun variety store that catered to homesick Fujianese immigrants, belied the international criminal network she would subsequently construct. What began as a modest operation, smuggling fellow villagers into America via commercial airlines using counterfeit documentation, rapidly evolved into an industrial-scale enterprise following the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989. The subsequent American policy offering Chinese students already in the United States the opportunity to remain created an unforeseen market opportunity that Sister Ping exploited with characteristic alacrity. Sister Ping's methodologies evolved in parallel with her ambition. No longer content with the relatively safe but limited approach of airline transport, she pivoted to maritime smuggling, a decision that dramatically increased both her profits and the peril to which her human cargo was exposed. The Golden Venture incident of June 6, 1993, when a cargo vessel carrying 286 illegal immigrants ran aground in Queens, New York, represented both the apotheosis of Sister Ping's operational scale and the beginning of her downfall. Though controversy remains regarding her direct involvement, with criminal associate Guo Liangqi implicating her potentially to mitigate his own legal jeopardy, the incident illuminated the vast scope of her enterprise for law enforcement agencies that had previously underestimated her significance in the criminal ecosystem. What distinguished Sister Ping from her criminal contemporaries was not merely the scale of her operations, but their sophisticated structure. She constructed an international network of facilitators, enforcers and financiers across multiple jurisdictions, creating a business model that anticipated the globalized criminal enterprises that would come to dominate the 21st century underworld. Her fees, ranging from $25,000 to $45,000 per person, represented sums that would require her clients to mortgage their futures through indentured servitude, often spending years in restaurant kitchens or garment factories to repay their passage. To ensure payment collection, Sister Ping formed a strategic alliance with the Fuqing Gang, Chinatown's most feared criminal organization. This symbiotic relationship provided her with the requisite muscle to enforce debt collection while supplying the gang with a reliable revenue stream. The financial sophistication of her operation extended beyond simple fee collection. Sister Ping established a parallel money-transmitting business through her Chinatown variety store, creating an informal banking system that facilitated the movement of funds without the scrutiny of regulatory authorities. What rendered Sister Ping's business model particularly insidious was her intuitive understanding of the psychological dimensions of migration. She capitalized not merely on economic disparities, but on the profound human yearning for a better life, what anthropologists sometimes term the geography of hope. Sister Ping exploited this psychological burden with clinical precision. Her clients' knowledge that failure to repay would result not only in personal consequences, but in shame that would redound upon their families in China, created a form of coercion more powerful than any physical threat. The estimated $40 million amassed by Sister Ping throughout her criminal career represented not merely personal enrichment, but the extraction of capital from some of the world's most vulnerable populations. The economics of her enterprise were predicated upon a fundamental arbitrage opportunity. The vast disparity between earning potential in rural China versus the United States created a price point where even exorbitant smuggling fees represented a rational economic decision for prospective migrants. The cultural resonance of Sister Ping extended beyond her operational significance. Within certain segments of the Chinese diaspora community, particularly among Fujianese immigrants, she acquired an almost mythological status, a complex folk hero whose criminality was mitigated by her perceived role in facilitating access to economic opportunity. The moniker Snakehead Queen, derived from the Chinese slang term for human smugglers, captured both her preeminence within this criminal specialty and the serpentine nature of her enterprise. Winding through multiple countries, slithering past immigration authorities, and periodically shedding its operational skin to evade detection. That she was invited to Beijing in 1994, along with other overseas notables of Fujianese descent for a Communist Party celebration, represents perhaps the most profound irony of her career. Though Sister Ping was arrested upon arrival, her reported ability to secure release through bribery illustrated the permeable boundary between criminality and legitimacy in post-reform China. The 5-year manhunt that culminated in Sister Ping's arrest at Hong Kong International Airport on April 17, 2000, represented a significant investment of international law enforcement resources. Her possession of 3 passports at the time of arrest, including a counterfeit Belize document under the alias Lily Zheng, indicated her sophistication in evading capture. Her eventual extradition to New York in July 2003 and subsequent trial before the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York represented the culmination of nearly a decade of legal pursuit. Her conviction in June 2005 on charges including conspiracy to commit illegal human smuggling, hostage-taking, money laundering and trafficking in ransom proceeds resulted in a 35-year sentence that effectively constituted a life term given her age. Sister Ping's incarceration at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, represented a stark contrast to the international mobility that had characterized her criminal career. Her reflection during a 2013 interview, being locked up for over 10 years, allowed me to think about my previous life. My heart calmed down, and I started to feel that jail was the safest place for me. Suggests a complex psychological accommodation to confinement. Yet her simultaneous protest, "I cannot believe they jailed me for 35 years. 35 years. In a way, I was killed by the FBI agents and tainted witnesses," reveals an enduring sense of injustice regarding the severity of her punishment. The diagnosis of pancreatic cancer in 2013 and her transfer to the Federal Medical Center, Carswell in Texas, added a final layer of confinement, the physical deterioration of the body itself. Sister Ping's story has transcended her individual criminality to become part of a broader cultural narrative about migration, exploitation, and the American dream. The thousands of individuals transported by Sister Ping's network represent her most enduring legacy. Many eventually secured legitimate status through various immigration provisions, established businesses, and raised American-born children who would never know the villages their parents fled. The economic impact of the Fujianese diaspora on their home villages, funds remitted to construct new houses, finance education, and establish businesses, represents another dimension of Sister Ping's inadvertent legacy. The transformation of rural Fujian through migration-driven investment has created surreal landscapes where elaborate Western-style villas stand adjacent to traditional farming structures, physical manifestations of the economic disparities that drove the migration Sister Ping facilitated. Any final assessment of Sister Ping must reckon with the fundamental moral ambiguity of her enterprise. Unlike traffickers who kidnap or deceive their victims, Sister Ping provided a service actively sought by her clients, who exercised agency in choosing to undertake the perilous journey. Perhaps Sister Ping is best understood not as an anomalous criminal figure, but as an entrepreneur who identified a market opportunity created by the structural contradictions of globalization. Her story illuminates the darker dimensions of the American dream, the exploitation, suffering, and criminality that often accompany the pursuit of prosperity. As Sister Ping lies in her final resting place at Kensico Cemetery in Valhalla, New York, her legacy continues to unfold in the lives of those she transported, in the ongoing debate about migration policy, and in the enduring mythology of the Snakehead Queen. In the labyrinthine underbelly of Naples, where power is measured not by ostentation, but by the whispered deference of one's name, Maria Licciardi carved an unprecedented path through the masculine dominion of organized crime. Born in the impoverished Neapolitan suburb of Secondigliano on March 24, 1951, Licciardi would transcend the limitations imposed by both her gender and diminutive stature to become one of the most formidable criminal strategists in the history of the Camorra. Her ascension to power represents not merely a biographical curiosity, but rather an illuminating case study in the evolution of criminal enterprises in post-industrial southern Italy, where traditional patriarchal structures yielded, however reluctantly, to pragmatic considerations of organizational efficacy. The Licciardi lineage had long been entrenched in the criminal firmament of Naples. Maria's father, a respected or local boss, bequeathed to his children not material wealth, but rather a more valuable inheritance, the understanding of power's mechanisms and the social capital necessary to navigate the treacherous waters of Camorra politics. Contemporary accounts of Licciardi's operational methodology suggest a figure more akin to a corporate executive than a traditional mob boss. Journalist Lucia Licciardi, no relation, characterized her management style as analogous to that of a multinational corporation's CEO, consistently seeking solutions that minimized law enforcement scrutiny and internal factional conflict. Judge Luigi Bobbio noted, with a clinical detachment befitting a criminologist, that the moment a woman takes charge of the organization, paradoxically, we witness a lowering of the emotional level and a better performance of the group's activities. This observation, while problematic in its essentialist gender assumptions, highlights the distinctive nature of Licciardi's leadership. Unlike many of her male counterparts, whose decision-making often appeared governed by considerations of honor, vengeance, and public reputation, Licciardi approached criminal enterprise with a dispassionate pragmatism that prioritized organizational sustainability and profit maximization. The testimony of Pentito Gaetano Guida provides invaluable insight into the structural role of women within the Secondigliano clan and Licciardi's particular significance. They are on the front line. Maria Licciardi, Gennaro's sister, is representative of this. She took orders to and from her brother. She transmitted his orders and messages, even those of major importance. On more than one occasion, she transported his orders to kill. I don't recall the details, but I know that for our clan, talking with Maria Licciardi was the same as talking with Gennaro, the boss. This testimony illuminates the gradual evolution of Licciardi's authority within the clan, transitioning from messenger to decision-maker, from conduit to source. It also highlights the often overlooked role of women as the backbone of the organization, responsible for critical operational functions. A critical but frequently neglected aspect of Licciardi's effectiveness was her maintenance of social legitimacy within Secondigliano. In a region characterized by endemic unemployment and the conspicuous absence of governmental social security infrastructure, the Licciardi clan functioned as a parallel state, providing essential economic opportunities to local residents. This patronage created a complex web of dependency, gratitude, and complicity that shielded clan operations from law enforcement scrutiny. The clan's occasional charitable distributions to Secondigliano's impoverished residents generated substantial goodwill, transforming potential informants into protective stakeholders. This strategic cultivation of community support represents a sophisticated application of social control theory, wherein the clan positioned itself not as a parasitic criminal entity, but rather as a necessary provider of economic stability and social order in an environment abandoned by legitimate governmental institutions. The implicit social contract between the clan and the community created a protective buffer of silence and support that proved invaluable during Licciardi's periods as a fugitive. Licciardi's most significant strategic achievement was arguably her preservation and expansion of the Secondigliano Alliance following her brother's death. The coalition she maintained united approximately 20 previously independent Camorra clans, creating an unprecedented criminal confederation capable of exercising territorial and commercial dominance throughout Naples and its environs. However, the inherent instability of criminal coalitions eventually manifested in a schism with the Rewrote clan, precipitated by a disagreement over the distribution of unrefined heroin from Istanbul. Licciardi, demonstrating a pragmatic concern for customer sustainability, decreed that the dangerously pure product should not be distributed in its uncut state, as it would likely result in fatal overdoses among the organization's user base. This decision prioritized long-term profit sustainability over immediate gains, a hallmark of Licciardi's strategic thinking. The Rewrote clan's defiance of this directive and subsequent distribution of the unaltered heroin resulted in a cascade of overdose deaths that triggered intense police scrutiny. The resulting law enforcement pressure fractured the already strained alliance, culminating in a bloody internecine conflict that claimed approximately 120 lives and featured tactics more commonly associated with conventional warfare than street crime, including car bombings and rocket attacks. This violent disintegration of the alliance Licciardi had so carefully maintained illustrates the inherent fragility of criminal confederations. The eruption of violence also precipitated Licciardi's transition from obscure criminal administrator to high-profile fugitive, as law enforcement investigations into the bloodshed inevitably led to her identification as a central figure in the Camorra hierarchy. Following her addition to Italy's 30 Most Wanted list, Licciardi demonstrated the same methodical approach to evasion that had characterized her criminal leadership. Despite intensive manhunts involving hundreds of officers and aerial surveillance, she remained within the Masseria Cardone district, relocating between various safe houses while continuing to direct clan operations. Even while evading capture, Licciardi maintained her authority and continued to order assassinations of rival mobsters, most notably engaging in conflict with the Giuliano clan of Forcella, headed by another female Camorra boss, Erminia Giuliano. When prosecutor Luigi Bobbio's successful prosecutions against clan members threatened to compromise her security, Licciardi responded with characteristic directness, ordering the bombing of his office building in January 2001. The circumstances of Licciardi's eventual capture on June 14, 2001, while traveling near Naples, were remarkably undramatic compared to the elaborate evasion tactics that had earned her the journalistic nickname the Scarlet Pimpernel of Italy. Her arrest, like much of her criminal career, was characterized by a quiet pragmatism. She offered no resistance and accepted her inevitable incarceration with the same stoic demeanor that had defined her leadership. The traditional assumption that incarceration neutralizes a criminal leader's influence proved inapplicable to Licciardi. As noted by Anna Maria Zaccaria, a sociologist at the University of Naples Federico II, specializing in women's roles within the Camorra, prisons do not represent a barrier for the Camorra. Her release in 2009 after serving approximately 8 years marked not the conclusion, but merely another chapter in her criminal career. The subsequent years witnessed a pattern of legal maneuvering, including the annulment of preventive detention orders by the Court of Naples in July 2019, following legal challenges by her attorney, Dario Vanatiello. Maria Licciardi's rise to power and sustained criminal career offers several profound insights into the evolving nature of organized crime and its interaction with broader social structures. First, her ascension demonstrates the adaptive flexibility of criminal organizations when faced with existential threats. The Licciardi clan's willingness to embrace female leadership in contravention of traditional patriarchal norms was predicated not on progressive gender politics but on pragmatic organizational survival. Second, her management style illustrates the ongoing professionalization of organized crime, with traditional concepts of honor and territorial identity increasingly subordinated to corporate-style considerations of profit maximization and risk management. Third, the community support that facilitated Licciardi's extended evasion of authorities highlights the complex relationship between organized crime and marginalized communities where governmental institutions have failed to provide basic economic security. Finally, Licciardi's willingness to transgress traditional Camorra prohibitions against prostitution demonstrates how criminal organizations, despite their conservative self-mythology, often function as laboratories for radical social innovation when profit incentives align with organizational transformation. Maria Licciardi stands as one of the most significant yet understudied figures in the modern history of organized crime. Her transformation from a peripheral family member to the leader of a sophisticated criminal confederation challenges conventional narratives about gender limitations within traditional criminal organizations. The contradictions embodied in her leadership, a woman who shattered gender barriers while intensifying the exploitation of vulnerable women, a leader who maintained community support while ordering numerous assassinations, a strategist who unified warring clans while ultimately presiding over one of Naples' bloodiest gang wars, reflect the complex moral universe of organized crime, where conventional ethical categorizations prove inadequate analytical tools. As Naples continues to grapple with the persistent influence of the Camorra, understanding figures like Licciardi becomes essential, not merely as a criminological exercise, but as a prerequisite for developing effective strategies to address the socio-economic conditions that facilitate organized crime's enduring appeal. In the impoverished neighborhoods of Naples, where legitimate opportunities remain scarce and governmental institutions remote, the organizational template refined by Licciardi continues to offer an attractive, if ultimately destructive, alternative path to power, respect, and economic security. The story of Maria Licciardi, the corporate CEO of crime, thus remains not merely a historical curiosity, but a vital case study in the evolution of criminal enterprise and its complex entanglement with broader social, economic, and political systems in 21st century Italy. In the pantheon of organized crime's most formidable figures, few have cast as long and as dark a shadow as Griselda Blanco Restrepo. Known variously as La Dama della Mafia, the Godmother, and perhaps most tellingly, the Black Widow, Blanco's trajectory from impoverished street urchin to cocaine empress represents one of the most remarkable and blood-soaked ascensions in criminal history. Her life, characterized by unprecedented violence, audacious enterprise, and ultimate hubris, offers a compelling lens through which to examine not merely the contours of a singular criminal mind, but the broader sociological underpinnings of Colombia's narcotic diaspora and its catastrophic integration into American urban centers during the latter half of the 20th century. Born on February 15, 1943, in the coastal Colombian city of Cartagena, Blanco's formative environment was steeped in deprivation and trauma. By age 3, she had relocated with her mother, Ana Restrepo, to Medellin, a fateful geographical shift that would expose the young Griselda to the city's burgeoning criminal ecosystem. This metropolitan crucible, already experiencing the socio-economic convulsions that would later facilitate its transformation into the epicenter of global cocaine production, provided Blanco with an education in survival's darkest arts. The most haunting anecdote from Blanco's childhood, recounted by her former paramour Charles Cosby, suggests that her proclivity for violence manifested with chilling precocity. At the tender age of 11, she allegedly orchestrated the kidnapping of a child from an affluent neighborhood, attempting to extract a ransom before ultimately executing her captive when the scheme faltered. Whether apocryphal or authentic, this narrative bears the hallmarks of the calculated brutality that would become Blanco's trademark. By adolescence, Blanco had immersed herself in Medellin's criminal underworld, operating as a pickpocket and likely engaging in prostitution. Her circumstances were further complicated by the sexual abuse perpetrated by her mother's boyfriend, trauma that propelled her to flee her home at 19. These early years fashioned Blanco into a survivor intimately acquainted with exploitation, both as victim and perpetrator. The psychological architecture of the future Godmother was thus constructed upon foundations of abandonment, violation, and the stark realization that power and violence were inextricably intertwined. Blanco's criminal apprenticeship transitioned toward narcotic enterprise through her first marriage to Carlos Trujillo. Together, they established a marijuana distribution operation in Colombia, a modest precursor to the cocaine colossus she would later command. Their union produced 3 sons, Dixon, Uber, and Osvaldo, all of whom would eventually be indoctrinated into their mother's criminal dynasty. The dissolution of her marriage to Trujillo did not sever their business relationship. though this arrangement would ultimately prove fatal for Blanco's first husband. When financial disagreements arose, Blanco responded with characteristic ruthlessness, ordering Trujillo's execution, establishing a pattern of lethal conflict resolution that would come to define her personal and professional interactions. In 1964, now partnered with her second husband, Alberto Bravo, Blanco illegally entered the United States using falsified documentation, establishing residence in Queens, New York. This relocation coincided with a pivotal metamorphosis in her criminal methodology. Recognizing cocaine's superior profit margins and nascent American market potential, Blanco and Bravo established a distribution network that would eventually become a pipeline of unprecedented scale. This entrepreneurial acumen, combined with Blanco's willingness to employ extreme violence as a business tactic, positioned her as a pioneer in the transnational narcotics trade decades before Pablo Escobar would become synonymous with Colombian cocaine. By 1975, the operation had grown substantial enough to attract federal attention. Indicted on drug conspiracy charges alongside 30 subordinates, Blanco and her family retreated to Colombia to evade prosecution. This tactical withdrawal, however, proved merely temporary. The latter half of the 1970s saw Blanco's return to American soil and the establishment of a new operational base in Miami, a decision that would coincide with one of the bloodiest epochs in the city's history. Blanco's arrival in Miami occurred at a transformative juncture in the American drug landscape. Cocaine had surpassed cannabis in profitability, and the demand for the white powder had created a vacuum that Blanco was uniquely positioned to fill. What followed was a period of unprecedented violence that would earn Miami the sobriquet the murder capital of America and necessitate the creation of CENTAC 26, a specialized anti-drug task force comprising the Miami-Dade Police Department and the Drug Enforcement Administration. The violence that characterized Miami's cocaine wars of the 1980s bore Blanco's unmistakable signature. She pioneered the use of motorcycle-bound assassins who would execute their targets in broad daylight before speeding away. A methodology that would, in an ironic circularity, eventually claim her own life decades later. Under her direction, murder became not merely a means of eliminating competition, but a form of psychological warfare designed to establish her supremacy through terror. Particularly innovative was Blanco's propensity for targeting the family members of her adversaries, a taboo even within the normally unrestrained moral architecture of organized crime. The financial scope of Blanco's operations during this period was staggering. Her distribution network, spanning both the United States and Colombia, reportedly generated $80 million per month, a sum that translated not only into immense personal wealth, but the ability to corrupt law enforcement, judiciary officials, and political figures across multiple jurisdictions. Parallel to her criminal enterprises, Blanco established a dynastic structure through her sons and successive marriages. Her third marriage to Dario Sepulveda produced her youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco. His name a deliberate homage to the fictional mafia scion from The Godfather, revealing Blanco's self-conception as criminal royalty. Blanco's empire began to unravel on February 17, 1985, when DEA agents apprehended her at her home. The subsequent federal trial in New York resulted in her conviction for conspiracy to manufacture, import and distribute cocaine, earning her a 15-year prison sentence. This federal case, however, represented only a fraction of the legal jeopardy Blanco faced. While serving her federal sentence, Florida prosecutors charged Blanco with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The state's case hinged on testimony from Jorge Ayala, one of Blanco's most trusted assassins, who had agreed to cooperate with authorities. This judicial compromise resulted in an additional 20-year sentence to be served concurrently with her federal punishment. Ultimately, Blanco served approximately 2 decades in American prisons before being granted compassionate release in 2004 due to deteriorating health. She was subsequently deported to Colombia, where she would spend the final 8 years of her life in relative obscurity. On September 3, 2012, the arc of Blanco's violent life reached its seemingly inevitable conclusion. While exiting a butcher shop in Medellin with her pregnant daughter-in-law, the 69-year-old Blanco was approached by an assassin on a motorcycle who shot her twice in the head, an execution method identical to the one she had pioneered during Miami's cocaine wars. This lethal symmetry provided a grimly poetic denouement to her criminal narrative. Griselda Blanco Restrepo represents a singular confluence of personal pathology, societal opportunity, and criminal innovation. Her life trajectory, from impoverished street child to international drug empress to convicted felon to assassination victim, contains narrative elements that would seem implausible in fiction, yet unfolded in documented reality. The scale of her operation, the extremity of her methods, and the duration of her criminal career place her among the most significant organized crime figures of the 20th century. What emerges from a comprehensive examination of Blanco's life is neither a feminist icon nor a simplistic villain, but a complex figure whose actions force us to confront uncomfortable questions about the malleability of human morality, the consequences of childhood trauma, and the dark potential of entrepreneurial ambition when divorced from ethical constraint. In Blanco's story, we find not merely a chronicle of criminality, but a mirror reflecting the darker potentialities of human nature. A reflection that continues to fascinate, disturb, and instruct long after the Godmother's bloody denouement on a Medellin street corner.